Two, one. Welcome to Sounding Point Podcast. Tim Fain is a violinist, composer, producer, Avery Fisher Career Grant recipient, a musician in such acclaimed films as Black Swan Moonlight and 12 Years a Slave, and many others. In recent years, Tim Fain has collaborated closely with Philip Glass, among many other legendary living composers. Not only that, but he has broken ground in his use of virtual reality as a concert component and expanded the definition of what a live concert experience can be in the 21st century. So it is my honor to welcome Tim Fain onto the podcast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. Nice afternoon.
Yeah, so I've been starting pretty much every podcast with the age-old question: how are you doing right now? How are you living during this pandemic? How's it affected you?
Well, it's affected me in almost every way imaginable. It's been a challenge, and with my family, we just a few days ago made the decision, my wife and I, we're going to keep them both home for next year. So we're going to be homeschooling our kids, which is, I mean, goodness knows I have a little more time. At least I'm traveling. I have been trying to keep as busy as I can. I actually just a couple days ago I wrote down the last notes of a new violin concerto that I've written, and writing some piano etudes as well, solo piano etudes, and doing a lot of live streaming, a lot of playing for folks on the internet, which has been very, very gratifying, actually, really satisfying. Been doing it every Saturday afternoon on Facebook, and I was thinking to myself, it's as much of a weekly schedule I think I've ever had in my life, at least since I was in college. This sort of weekly rhythm that just has not been a part of my experience, really, at least in my professional life. So there have been some silver linings. Obviously, as you can imagine, everything's a lot of the film work I was scheduled to do, both collaborative and composing. There was a project, a commercial project that they wanted to license a track of mine that also has been indefinitely postponed. And yeah, it's hard to see that happen, and to know that this is all happening alongside other people's struggles as well, and to know that there are a lot of people who are struggling a lot more than I. So despite that, and despite all of the life, I do feel pretty lucky to be in the place where I am, and have the space here in my studio in Western Montana, where we've been sheltering, to have that to come back to, and to have that space to create. I do feel very fortunate.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I grew up homeschooled, actually,
Did
and
you?
I did. So, but before it was technologically necessary, and necessitated by a pandemic. So, I mean, speaking from that experience, it was very positive for me and my family. So it's cool to hear that you're doing that.
Well, yeah, get another year with my kids at home. I'm really excited about it. I'm really looking forward to it. And I I think that in many ways my life at home has, it's almost weird to say this, but there've been a lot. It hasn't changed all that much, at least when I'm home. I get up early in the morning, get to work. The kids wake up, and I'm with them for a bit, and then get back to work in the afternoon. And I've been trying to really take advantage, as much as I can, of this, the possibility of work, on my own, that I can do. There's no question that I'm thinking a lot about, long term as well, and the future of life performance, the future of just music distribution, how this is all going to that, and just what that means for performers, what that means for the next generation of performers too, how they are going to. I have no doubt that there will be ways that people express themselves and share with others, but I am concerned that there's something in face-to-face transaction, or at least transaction where people are physically present. Maybe I'm biased, or maybe it's just me getting old, but I do feel that there's something that's lost in that. And on one hand, I'm really fascinated with what is gained in the ability to connect with people who are in different sides of the globe and to all come together through music. And a live performance online can be every bit as captivating. But I don't know. Something is lost, and I would be sorry if we aren't able to really start up live performances as we know them again for this.
Absolutely. It's cool to hear you say that, because I know that your projects have taken you. I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to ask you on this podcast was that not only with the live streaming, but in general, your work with VR and your interest in pushing the technology of of musical performance strikes me as like extremely relevant right now. It's very important that musicians are thinking about this right now. But I mean, honestly, the pandemic is just kind of showing it's speeding things up, because as 21st century musicians, this is all stuff we have to think about seriously as musicians anyway. How do we connect with people right now?
And virtual reality, which you mentioned, is definitely a way that I think the technology is such that it pulls you in. I think even if the quality of the piece or the film is not as good, just the technology itself pulls you in and really draws your attention. And I think is a very valuable tool for creators to engage their audience and fans. Certainly, a number of years ago, I produced a live performance, a live evening length show called Portals, which was really about just this, the role of live performers and live performance in the age of, in the, and I roped in a number of collaborators. Leonard Cohen actually had very kindly allowed me to use some of his words, drawing from interviews, song lyrics, and put together this script that really takes one on a journey, I think, through this desire to connect, this longing for connection in the digital age, how that looks. I think he was very tickled to have his words being used in such a modern context, because I'm the only live performer in the course of the show. But it's very easy to forget that as an audience member, because it's a richly collaborative show. Nicholas Bertel is choreographer, actually directed and choreographed reading as well. Fred Child from Performance Today is reading the Leonard Cohen script, and you see him in this very modern looking library, and it's very easy to forget. I've had people come up afterwards and tell me that they forgot that Nicholas wasn't just there on the piano. He projected lifestyle screen behind me, and in these very slow tracking shots. That other times in the show, it's almost as if you're there. These cams, the sort of wiggly cams that make you feel almost as if you are there in the room with us as we're rehearsing. The dancers are here. But I always get a kick out of that. I did, and I still perform the show from time to time, or I did before before COVID hit. But yeah, it's I get sort of a kick out of that when people tell me why. I actually forgot that Nick wasn't actually on stage with you. Moment, even longer than a moment. It's a little terrifying, but it's also invigorating.
Yeah. I found I love watching on your YouTube channel. It had some of the the Philip Glass partita movements along with those visuals and films choreographed. Um, but and I understood. Oh, this is part of your project Portals.
A part of it, exactly,
Yeah.
because of course of the show, those are projected, and there I am performing as this kind of this interplay between what is happening on screen and what is happening live. I really resisted the people asked me to make a video of Portals, to film of the entire concert, and I wasn't interested in that as much, because the whole point of it was that it was the live experience. Sat down in a concert hall and you watched this unfold on stage, where boundaries between the live and technology were blurred.
Hmm. Yeah, I kind of realized that as I was watching. I mean, I thought it was amazing, just watching the videos and hearing you play. But then when I learned it was part of this bigger project, I'm like, dang it! Why didn't I catch one of these? I'd really like to see this live. It's really hard to imagine.
Well,
I'm guessing it's hard to imagine if you haven't seen it.
well, I mean, at the time, I think it was quite different than anything that was out there. I think now, really you see that sort of interplay and that sort of thing more often, which I'm happy about, because and in some way, maybe Portal's got people thinking a little bit, got creators thinking a little bit about that. And Yeah, but certainly some of the VR pieces that I've worked on, um, I think, I mean, it's hard to believe, the resonance of the project with Google, kind of takes uh, it's sort of, the story of it is this inception of a melody, which then starts to be, it's just I'm in my own space, which is not exactly, it's not actually my own space, but still, meant to feel like that, some sort of bohemian kind of attic. And I start just plucking out this, comes this thing, and almost to outsized proportions within 3 minutes, full orchestra in Avatar Studios with you as the viewer in the center. I'm pretty sure it was the first virtual experience to actually take people inside a symphony orchestra. Um, and the sort of inception and then realization of a melody into a piece, and resonance is in some ways a loosely set of variations on that theme. Uh, and Yeah, it's hard to believe that was 5 years ago. And the technology now is almost a little bit. You look at it and you say, "Oh, that's so cute." It's a little pixelated here and there. Oh, I can see a little artifact there from the stitching. It's in real time. Back then, it took weeks. You know, and it was and duct tape was a very important in all stages, pretty much. Not just the shooting, holding things together. Literally, Jessica and Nick Cadner, who sadly passed away a year and a half after the production. Just rolls of duct tape and wires and and this big camera that looked like a flying saucer with these hacked GoPro cameras around. But I think in some ways it's still, even that, you watch that. It was one of the first VR projects I was a part of, and I think it's still, there's something about it, just that it draws you into this world.
Oh yeah, the music is beautiful.
Oh,
First of
thank you.
all, and yeah, I mean it draws you in just based on the visuals, and also obviously you're kind of moving around, so you as the audience, if you want to see where you are and see what's going on, you have to like kind of change the angle of the camera, and then you're like, oh, the sound changes,
Yeah,
so
it was actually the role of that piece as it was released was to announce to the world that YouTube was beginning to have interactive, adaptive 360, which they hadn't up until that. Actually, that technology got delayed a couple months, so we ended up deciding that we wanted to release the piece with the idea that within a month or two, the sound would follow and it would be a
Ah,
interactive sound.
I see. Huh.
But
Cool.
you're saying about that about resonance. That was the first of three short pieces that I've written over the last few years for violin orchestra, and then now this full length 23 and a half minute long violin concerto that
Wow.
just finished. I'm going through and proofing the score. Don't know where I'm going to play it, somehow.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Once real or once, well, I mean, worst case, get a virtual orchestra together.
a bunch of friends and yeah,
Mm-hmm.
make your own orchestra on
Mm-hmm.
here. I've been a part
Exactly.
of projects, in the last few months that groups of musicians put together and, get a click track and everybody plays together. Or even a video of a conductor, which I like better because if the conductor is filmed in a way that really you can really see and it allows for a kind of a human, I don't know what it is, a delay or a slight latency in the performance, or something about, and the conductor might be listening to a clip, but the fact that he is moving his arms, there's something that comes out of it which I think is a little bit more expressive, a little bit more free. Maybe it has something that alludes a bit more to this human quality of flexibility and emotive music making.
It's funny you mentioned that because my string quartet recorded all individual parts in the way you're describing, mostly with click track for the Cabrillo virtual concert. Um,
Yeah, congrats
and
on
what's that?
congrats on that. That's
Oh,
great. It was amazing.
thank you. Yeah, it's a wonderful festival. I'm so glad. We were thrilled beyond belief that we were going to be playing at Cabrillo, and then it gets canceled, and we were devastated. So it's really amazing of them to have a virtual season.
That's really great. Yeah,
So
yeah. I played there a couple times with Matt Heimovitz, cellist. Some of you who are watching might
shout out Matt Heimovitz.
sing. Yeah, he's done so many. It's like he's had a few different lives already. A child signed with DG and Deutsche Grammophon, playing, at the age of 17 with virtually every major orchestra, and really had a rethinking and a changing of path. Um, Started performing in very much in alternative venues around the country. This project traveled all 50 states playing in bars,
Hmm.
restaurants, pizza restaurants, just everywhere, just bringing music to the most unlikely places. Now he's working very closely with a number of uh, living composers, and
Hmm.
yeah, so I like
Fantastic.
that. Yeah, you should all check his. Yeah. And he has some beautiful Beethoven recordings with Christopher O'Reilly.
Oh yeah.
We're in fact we were yeah, everybody's got things that were canceled, and one of the things that is on hold for us now is some piano trio work with myself, Matt, Christopher O'Reilly.
Really? Oh my gosh, I can't wait to
Yeah,
hear that.
I know. Me too. And yeah, I mean, I think the Beethoven sonatas that they recorded together with Matt forte are well worth the listen. Really
Fantastic.
beautiful.
I'll definitely have to check that out. Um, yeah, I would love eventually. I'd love to have him on as well. I love talking to people like that who have been finding unconventional ways of being a 21st century musician and doing it at the highest level of quality. Um, so one thing, when you mentioned about the conducting, I found it interesting because when we were recording for the Cabrillo Festival, we had a couple um, pieces where we were playing along with a recording. The composer for one of our pieces sent us basically his piano reduction of the quartet to click.
Mm.
That performance was so seamless because we were playing along to his rhythmic impulse. And something about when we were purely going on click. I mean, in a string quartet, you're you're paying so much attention to each other in the room, and about articulation and beginning and ending notes and phrasing, all this stuff, that when you're just playing to a metronome, it's hilarious how differently four people can interpret a single click.
Yeah, something about it. Maybe if it doesn't feel natural, one's inclined to stray in ways that feel more natural. But everybody strays in different ways when you're not in the same room. I was in a string quartet for I think 6 years when I was younger. The first fiddle player of the Rossetti string quartet, no longer in existence. But yeah, I spent a lot of time working with them. Played all over the place. And
That wouldn't happen to be Nina Bodnar, would it?
she was my predecessor in the group,
Okay.
actually. She was the first fiddle player before I she left, and
Oh, okay.
yeah, this was a number of years ago.
Okay, cool. I study with Nina, so anyway, it's a small world.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I don't know her that well, but she's great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
incredible.
Um, yes. So I do really know what you mean. What you mean about the string quartet in
Hmm.
is an interesting animal in that way. For those of you who may be musicians listening as well, you might be able to relate to this. As far as a string quartet, I always felt piano trio much more, and it could be a function of the way many piano trios, particularly in the classical literature, are written. It's almost as if three soloists come together and performing. It just seemed to me that that was very appropriate, lent itself to that kind of way of music making. Whereas the string quartet, you may have four players who are of soloist quality for sure. I think really players are coming from that world who just fallen in love with the string quartet literature. You could think of the symphonies are almost like the novels that composers write, and the string quartets are a bit more sort of like a peek into their diary, reading their love
Hmm.
letter, and and there's something very beautiful about that, and the literature is better than that. There's something about the string quartet where the degree of listening is something that I think is parallel music groups set in classical literature.
Yeah, it's very gratifying to. It almost feels like how in when you're playing in an opera orchestra or something where every performance is different, and there's this intense dialogue between the stage and the orchestra, and it's channeled through the conductor, and there's all this sort of energy in the moment of like, oh, I gotta, it's like that edge of being with it or not with it, that you're, I don't know, there's a feeling of timing that's so dynamic and exciting when you're playing an opera. That I get that feeling in a string quartet sense as well, when you're
Mm.
communicating, and then someone decides to do something a little do new, and everyone listens, and it can, when it's going right, it feels amazing.
Yeah, 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 for sure.
So I wanted to ask you about your composing, because so you had the Resonance, you had also the Freedom project. I
Uh
wanted to
huh.
ask you a little bit about that.
Yeah, freedom was something that I had written. This sort of second of these three short pieces for violin and orchestra, the third being Glacial. It's released on my birthday. And each one of these pieces had this real sort of story around it. Freedom was as a result of my involvement in a couple of different organizations. Um, One in particular being Made in a Free World, which is an organization run by my friend Justin, who is a fellow musician, a rock and roller, and just we really connected on the power of music to bring people together, to rally people, to understand and to pay attention to issues, particularly the issue of modern slavery. in our world today, and what a monumental problem it is right now in every country in the world, virtually every country and every major city. Um, and their mission is to put an end to human slavery through conscious consumerism. I thought that they bring as light of a touch to this issue as I think possible, and which I think you might say, well, why would they do that? You know, serious thing. Well, I think many people either who don't realize or who don't think about this a lot may feel very like it's so difficult or so close to home or something that just is so difficult to get to really understand the issues, that bringing this sort of bringing people in, I think, is a real add to what they do. So Freedom was written as, it was released as a charity single that we raised some money for them, and the track has continued to do pretty well online, and people seem to enjoy it. So glad about it. I think it's a very uplifting piece.
Yeah, beautiful, very uplifting. I find that's. I was talking earlier with Lydia Yankovskaya. She's the music director of the Chicago Opera Theater, and we were talking about this same topic of what role do we musicians have in social change. And I think it's interesting because in some senses music is very insular, where we musicians we are, you know, we're trying to attain excellence for its own sake in a way, and obviously we want to connect with our audiences, but in a way sometimes I feel that the art is almost self-contained. It's like we value the art for its own sake, but at the same time, do we have a duty to use it for social change? What do you think about that?
I think a lot about that. I when I was had the opportunity and honor to play for His Holiness 14th Dalai Lama's birthday party in California, Orange County, a few years back, and I didn't really know whether I would get a chance to speak to him, and I was getting ready to perform, and I knew I would probably see him afterwards with, you know, people's kind of stage, which I'm sure they would do it. But it was a very intimate event, and I was getting ready to play, and somebody tapped me on the back. A guy in a black suit with an earpiece said, "Well, if you'd like to meet His Holiness, I'd like you to come with me right now, please." And I put away the violin, and we got into a golf cart and wound our way up in this estate, and we got to this little this garden, and there he was, and I went over to him, and we greeted one another, and I was just sort of rambling on, and he stopped me and sort of pointed his finger at me, and got this smile, and he said, "Musicians have great responsibility," and he just started to laugh, you know, with his whole body. And I started to laugh, and even the bodyguard started to chuckle too, you know, because he was so right, but he brought this absolutely joyful, ebullient spirit to it, you know, that you couldn't help but just be swept along with it. I just remember his laugh and laughing with him, and you know, I had a few questions to ask for him as well, but that's what I really remember. Great responsibility, and so I think about that a lot, and it's inevitably, it comes with a sense of of happiness, of joy, and sort of fulfillment, and really that as kind of a motivator for. I mean, glacial. This third in this what's sort of turned into a three-part or triptych in some way, but these three pieces together was also done with the idea that it's originally. I knew that I wanted to release it in some way connected with the environment, but I wasn't sure how to do it. And then Earth Day was coming up, and I said, you know what, now is the time. And I'd originally written it as a wedding gift for my friends Rachel and Mikkel, who were getting married down Antarctica. They rented a research vessel for 2 weeks and planned a trip down. Mikhail's amazing guy. He created Life Straw. This,
Oh yeah.
yeah, that allowed people in areas where the water was completely polluted to, or undrinkable, to drink water just from this device that would purify it.
I have one.
You have one? Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
you never know. You never know when you need it.
Involved in so many different causes. A few years ago, he helped design and launch a suborbital uh, satellite, which was really more like a blimp. He described it as, if you think of like the Goodyear blimp, but um, a couple of football fields long, and uh, then it was released up into the stratosphere, measuring all sorts of different things. We call it the blimp for good because it was weather patterns, changing weather patterns. It could be used to help uh, gather data on slavery ring, on criminal activity, and social justice issues that could help, uh, and many different things, many different sets of data that they were gathering. So interesting, both of them just really interesting people. And I wrote this piece, and I think if you listen to Glacial, there's this kind of undercurrent of something slightly something slightly disquieting. The tremolo on the piano, sort of very fast, portal, trembling motion, which at times bubbles up to the surface. And that for me was not only sort of the what they were about to get into in their marriage, a great responsibility, it's sort of this path that they were on, where they would experience this sort of tumultuous times, and also very I don't know, but it was also just this sense of urgency that we feel to help combat global warming and a number of different causes around habitable place for humans. Years to come.
Wonderful. I
It
thought,
started out releasing it on Earth Day was kind of just hopefully get a few people to think about that through music. Music power to open up people's hearts and minds.
that's beautiful. I think I love that story about the Dalai Lama. I'm glad you brought it up. I was going to ask you about that visit if you didn't bring it up. And I think that's so cool that he both said this important idea that musicians have this responsibility, but then he also delivered it with this humor, because it's hard, because like when you feel that responsibility, it feels weighty. When it can be very serious. So the fact that you lightened it up is really cool.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, but it's such a strange time now, and I hope that for people who are listening, that just to take heart and to create as much as you can. Don't don't get too discouraged. Just try to do what it takes to keep your art alive, and listen to as much music as you can, and experience art where you can as well. And we'll get through this. And, hopefully, many of us will emerge even stronger. That's the hope. There's a lot of people who are suffering, who won't, who will lose their lives and who will lose family. It's very disturbing, and it's a difficult time. I hope that some of you will be able to keep yourselves optimistic, and in some way looking toward a future where we can resume live performances. We can help people through music. One of the things that really been focusing on lately is just this innate power that music has to do so many things, but particularly to help people heal. With my friend Jacob Marshall, we have we're starting this collective of artists and musicians called EMBC, Embassy, which we're focused on creating multisensory experience in art. And we've been working with Mount Sinai in New York pretty closely the last couple of months, building collaboration with Studio Elsewhere to build these reach in the hospitals for the doctors, and getting some pretty overwhelming support. We have, I think, 11 of these recharge rooms now in various hospitals in the New York area. You walk in, you're greeted with a scent, perhaps, and one whole wall is like a projected uh, campfire on a deserted beach. Of course, there is sound design and music that's coming at you spatially. The lighting is, we've thought a lot about the lighting as well, and animal sounds. In fact, we've used some animal sounds in some of our music. Something which I find really interesting about the sounds of animals, which create sort of these constant, but sort of evolving, but constant tapestries of sound. Crickets, frogs in a pond. What happens when there is danger? They stop and it's silent. So actually, silence for us can be quite unsettling for the human mind, but to have these very pervasive and relaxing sounds of nature, particularly insects and small animals that speak and communicate in unison as a swarm, can be extremely relaxing. And it's been really interesting seeing the effect that music particularly has had on the doctors, the health practitioners. And now we're opening it up to creating a much larger space in the Mount Sinai West Hospital, in one of their atriums, where people in the patient experience and hopefully gain a little bit of peace and tranquility and introspection during what otherwise is a very painful and confused experience and difficult experience.
Well, I feel like that's, of all the kind of projects I've heard of in the pandemic time, this is probably one of the most directly beneficial frontline artistic projects I've heard of that addresses the needs of the coronavirus.
Artists working at the front lines in the ways that we can. And if you told me a few months ago, 6 or 7 months ago, when we first started working on this with Studio Elsewhere and with Mount Sinai, if you told me that a bunch of artists and musicians to a hospital and strive to transform what was possible, even just legally, what was possible in a hospital, and I would have said you were crazy. For a slow moving system, and there's so much red tape, and I think that really may also speak to. I'd like to think that part of it is what we're offering has turned out to be quite special, I think, for people. But also, I think in large part, I think truly that the doctors and the administrative staff at these hospitals were out there with and really searching for what could actually help, what would help, and willing to break a few rules and rewrite what was possible to that end. So it's been really inspiring to see that.
That's amazing. What it's called? Embassy, EMBC.
EMBC, yeah, we're really just only just starting to get the word out now, but we've been working in the hospitals in this capacity for many months now, and I think it's time to tell the story, because there's a lot of other people out there who are struggling, who are suffering, I think could benefit from these experiences, which are designed specifically to help people heal through music and art.
That is incredible. I'm gonna plug it from and I hope all my friends do too. That's such an amazing project. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, I appreciate that, Joe. Yeah, and both Jacob and I will, yeah, we're all on this journey together. So
Fantastic.
appreciate that.
Before we go, I wanted to ask you a couple a couple things about your kind of journey as a musician. One is, of course, working with Philip Glass. Like, you've had the opportunity, to my understanding, not just to obviously play works of his, but also to collaborate with him closely in recitals. So I was wondering if you could just tell us what it's like working with him and playing his music with the man himself.
Yeah, well, we've performed a lot together. Most recently, for the last 5 or 6 years, in duo concerts, duo recitals, performing his music. And I think that one of the biggest lessons or takeaways, from all of that, were, besides just the fact that we just really enjoy one another's company, and just the backstage chats, post performance. He's very protective of that time right after performance. Get off stage. I think as performers, we're very, as a matter of course, we make ourselves very vulnerable and very open. We become this conduit during the course of performance, and not only classical musicians, any type of musician, any type of artist while they're creating, and that time kind of coming down off of that backstage, and we would just, everybody would kind of leave the room, and we'd be there, and we'd just have these chats about music, and not even so much about critiquing or thinking about what that performance was, but just what music can do, and the sort of just the importance and the power of creating music together. I think, apart from that, one of the big sort of the takeaways from my work with him is just the flexibility that he lends to his music. This has changed, but certainly a few years back, for the most part, his music was often performed in ways which I would call, well, at their worst, inflexible. And to listen to him perform some of his music, particularly some of his more recent compositions, it would be the performance practice much more into Johannes Brahms, than any of the other composers. And that was very interesting to perform with him, to record with him, and to really just let that spirit of flexibility and emotive quality that comes through in his own performances of his own music really let that uh, sort of um, really get swept along by that myself. Uh, and there are moments on stage where I know that he's just in his own world, and it almost doesn't matter what I'm doing, different timings. And it makes me think of working on larger projects, like a film, for example. At a certain point, everybody lost control of the film, even the director many times. But they've set something in motion, and the really fine directors know how to set set the production of a film in motion in such a way that it goes along this seemingly inevitable path, but that is a path that has been designed, and to embrace the things that happen. And in a way, I feel that with Philip. Sometimes I'm just there along for the ride. He's just absolutely in the zone, and I'm feeling that as well. And we just let it happen. And so I think that sort of spirit, just even thinking about those moments, just makes me feel like I'm gonna play better today. It's like listening to Nathan Milstein.
Yeah.
You listen to Yasha Heifetz and you're wowed and amazed, and rightly so. And you think, oh, I could never do it. And you're probably right. I know I am. Who would try to play like It's nobody. Dr. Wilde says everybody else is taken anyway, so just be yourself.
Yeah.
But with Milstein, I listen to Nathan Milstein, and I think, and maybe I could do that. It sounds so easy.
Mm-hmm.
He could take the violin, put it on his head,
Yeah.
and play behind his back.
Mm-hmm.
But I listen to Nathan Milstein, and I think to myself, wow, he made it sound good. Yeah, too. And you know what? I take up my violin, and I am playing a little better than I was before. So I think, yeah, this spirit of generosity and flexibility and that's really what I remember. And I was talking with him a couple days ago. He's doing well, and I think, like everybody, really excited to get back on the road.
It's wonderful. Did you do you find yourself maybe not emulating? How do you find find yourself inspired by him when you're composing? And I guess, how did you get into composing?
Well, I've always been interested in composing. I think I was learning how to write music before I was learning how to write words when I was a kid. I didn't really dive into it though until about, I don't know, 10 or 15 years ago. Really, and then the last few years, really, I don't know. It's just become something I can't imagine, my life without. It's just become very much a part of what I do, and many collaborations with living composers end up being sometimes even composing out different sections and really helping the composer to understand what I do. And I think the really, really good composers at the top level understand this and embrace that. To a certain extent, I think, but I remember one time I had written an alternate cadenza for the one that Aaron Jacobs. I was getting ready to play Aaron Kerns' piece, Violin Concerto with Baltimore Symphony, and I'd written out a different cadenza for it. And this was sort of a long, extended passage where the violin starts to play all by itself. The orchestra musicians put down their instruments, the violin takes the floor for a bit, and then it leads back in to the final part of the piece. And I'd written my own version of it, and I played it for Aaron, and he listened, and he said, "Well, I liked it very much. I think I'd prefer the one that I." So it was always it's always you never know how composers are going to react, and I think of myself in their shoes as well. I would be very touched if a musician did that. I would also really try to think about what served the piece as a whole better. And I think actually his is very interesting in that piece, because there are moments where it feels as if the violin is being pulled apart. It's a very violent experience. And it leads into one of the most tender, transcendently beautiful sections of, I think, anything he's ever written. There's a moment, the last part of the piece, where he's stashed two harps, one on either side of the stage, as far to the edges and as far up as possible. In this case, they were in the balcony, sort of the box of the stage. And there's an offstage oboe as well. Oboe has such a piercing but kind of expressive sound. And to stash the oboe player back behind the curtain was just such a magnificent effect. And so, in a way, his solo violin passage, this cadenza, really served its purpose. This final outpour, this violence and that anger before this moment. So I respected his decision. I think it was the right decision. But look, I mean, I think it's been a journey for me, and continues to evolve. And I'll definitely keep you posted about this violin concerto. And
Yeah. Oh my gosh, can't wait.
As I am able to record that with other musicians.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's been such a pleasure talking with you, and it's really congrats on on your series here. Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, thank you. It's been an honor talking to you. I'd love to have you back on sometime,
love
and
that too.
yeah, I think what you're doing out there is um, not only artistically fascinating and beautiful, but also you are uh, your path is very inspirational. I think to 21st century musicians to see what's possible and also what we can do to make a difference. So thank you and keep it up.
I appreciate that, Joe. Yeah, thanks a lot.
All right, take care.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks.
Thanks. Take care.